Mr Murison, thank you so much for being with us. Just in terms of that Prime Ministerial visit to the North earlier this week, do you detect a change in tone from this Conservative government when it comes to support for the Powerhouse?
I think it's been a remarkable change. So for the last 3 years, under Theresa May's government, I think that the progress has probably been most generously described as lacklustre. I think the reality of what Boris Johnson announced last week, including the funding and a commitment to fund the new line between Leeds and Manchester, which we believe should come through the city centre here in Bradford, the great city of Bradford, to really transform and unlock the economic potential that currently isn't being taken advantage of in the north, is a completely new approach from the government. And I think that particularly by putting Jake Berry around the cabinet table, appointing those like Rishi Sunak who are strong supporters of northern infrastructure, I think we have also got a team around the Prime Minister who can genuinely deliver, which we didn't have previous to the change of government.
But does it go far enough? I hear news this morning that 100 business leaders from the North are writing to the Prime Minister with one key suggestion.
Yeah, absolutely. So on devolution, we've been writing today along with John Heaps, who's the chairman of the Yorkshire Building Society, where I'm speaking to you from, but also business leaders like Jürgen Meyer, who runs Siemens, Chris Oglesby, who runs Bruntwood, a number of our chambers of commerce, like the chief executive of the chamber in East Lancashire. These people have all come together to send a clear message, along with those who run a lot of our big organisations supporting business, like our local enterprise partnerships. They've all come together here in the north to say that devolution is a key step we need to take, because unless we unlock the northern economy, even if we improve the infrastructure, we won't have the skills and talent that our businesses need. And so if you look, for instance, here in Bradford, we don't have a directly elected mayor with responsibility for improving services here in Yorkshire, outside of the Sheffield City region. We don't have that in Cumbria or in Lancashire or in further down in Cheshire in the northwest. We need to fix that problem so that rather than only half the north having a directly elected mayor, we get to that 100% figure, which we believe, alongside that investment in infrastructure, would deliver the vision that George Osborne supported and made happen when he was Chancellor, and that Jim O'Neill, who sort of came up with the intellectual ideas, wanted to achieve. Because although he wanted to bring the north together as a virtual city using that new line which Boris mentioned, we need to make sure that those in Bradford who want the jobs, those talented young people, this is Britain's youngest city, have got the skills to take jobs, whether they be here in organisations like this in financial services or across in Manchester or across in Leeds. At the moment, they don't get the support with skills because we haven't got that power here in the north to influence the skills system, and they also don't have the infrastructure. We need both of those to happen, and I think under Boris Johnson, whatever people's views about the wider government's policies, we do have someone who, having been an ex-mayor, being the Mayor of London previously, is committed to support that agenda.
Given, though, the support that you are seeing from Boris Johnson for the Powerhouse, I mean, why is it impossible for these changes to be made at a remove, at a distance from central government, rather than through the process of devolution that you're asking for?
I think the key point is that if you want to spend, for instance, £39 billion building a new railway, I would accept that the Treasury and central government might have some role in that. And I think the North, though, could play a much bigger role, along with the private sector, in being trusted to deliver that project in a different way to how we traditionally deliver infrastructure. But if you want to, for instance, improve skills, you can't do that from a desk in Whitehall. And what we've seen around the adult education budget, for instance, which is now being spent by a Tory mayor in Teesside, by Labour mayors in places like Liverpool and Greater Manchester, they're doing a much better job with the existing scarce resources. So we want to spend more money in the north, but I think when Richard Leese, who was the leader of Manchester who first pioneered this agenda, still very much part of the team driving forward the Greater Manchester economy, he was really clear that as well as getting that new investment that we need in the north of England to rebalance our economy, it would be pretty silly if we didn't spend better the money we've already got. And when you look, for instance, at how Andy Burnham is challenging and improving transport in Greater Manchester, he's building the B lines, a network of cycle lanes. He's not just doing what maybe somebody in Whitehall would do. And the response to that from communities, from businesses, is actually that we think we're getting better decisions through our directly elected mayors. And unfortunately at the moment, places like here in Bradford are missing out, despite the fact that this is one of those places that if we don't take advantage of it, the UK won't succeed, whatever happens with Brexit, never mind the north of England. And this is in the national interest. So I also believe, for instance, in other parts of the country, that devolution could play a bigger role. I've also would be an admirer of, for instance, Andy Street in the West Midlands, who's doing a great job with his economy. So the North is obviously the place where there are 50 million people, where the government can make the biggest difference. But I also think the decentralisation of power, moving away from a Whitehall machine, which is fundamentally broken in terms of making the right investments for our country, is the only way that we're going to move forward as a country. And it's the only way that we're going to tackle that underlying productivity gap, because we know that making poor decisions from Whitehall is one of the reasons why outside of London, the South East, we don't see the type of economy that we will need to have if we're going to succeed in the global race.
How convinced then are you of the merits of HS2?
I think we would be absolute supporters of HS2, and I think that the Northern business leaders who have written this letter have also on many occasions lobbied for that, and I hope that Claire Fox gets some difficult questions from you. I think the only policy is a no-deal Brexit and cancelling HS2 from the Brexit Party, and as they want to win votes in the north of England, I think their economic decision-making and rationale is pretty appalling. I think that what we would say about HS2 is it is more valuable because it will be linked to Northern Powerhouse Rail. So the train line that the Prime Minister backed last week between Leeds and Manchester, that's part of the wider network to get you from Newcastle to Manchester Airport, from Hull to Liverpool. That wider network, when you plug it into HS2, will really rebalance the economy. And I think that that challenge that we want people to get around the north of England for jobs, we also want to be able to bring in talent from slightly further afield and allow people, for instance, to go to Birmingham. If you live in the north of England, in Leeds or Bradford, it's almost impossible, other than by getting in a car, to get to places like Birmingham. The transport networks to get around and between our regions are absolutely appalling. And so in this part of the world where we haven't built a new railway east to west since the Victorians, I think it's perfectly right that the country builds a new line, for instance, from Leeds to Birmingham and on to London, a new line from Manchester to Birmingham, and a new line between Leeds and Manchester. Because if we do that, we will get those really transformative economic benefits. And I think a concern for me is that despite the National Infrastructure Commission saying we can afford both, we can also actually afford Crossrail 2 if you do both those projects within 1.2% of GDP. There are some people out there saying we have to choose between being able to get people, for instance, young people being able to get from Bradford to Manchester for work, or people from Leeds and Bradford being able to get to London or Birmingham, having the capacity we need on that HS2 network. I don't think anyone in London had to choose between building the new rail line to Paris, the Channel Tunnel Rail Link, HS1, to give it its proper title, or building Crossrail, which I think when it opens will demonstrate the real value for money that it will bring for London taxpayers who've partly contributed along with government to make that scheme happen. I believe that in the north of England, we deserve both. We deserve the ability to be able to get people to work reliably and quickly, and we deserve better connections to the rest of the country. And I think that when the government's review of HS2 has been concluded, I think if we can get a delivery model that integrates HS2 and building Northern Powerhouse Rail together, we'll be able to save money, but we'll also be able to demonstrate that that combined network actually will be more valuable than doing either HS2 or Northern Powerhouse Rail on its own. I think by building both projects, we'll deliver the vision that George Osborne had, which was that connectivity can really unlock that growth.
Henri Murison, many thanks for joining us.